Yeah, so today we are going to discuss about globalization. Last time we had looked at it and some of you had not attended. And so today we have to briefly look at globalization and its effect in Africa, and then we shall proceed to the next topics. So having looked at citizenry and professionalism, now we are going to look at this segment, and then later on we shall proceed with the globalization and labor migration, and then later on we shall go to human trafficking, and then we shall also move to terrorism and extremism. And that will be maybe a subject of another day. So globalization is something that has been there for a long time. Globalization of markets and production has produced many opportunities and new threats for businesses in Africa and other parts of the developing world. And we shall have the chance to look at globalization from different perspectives, from the Marxist or from the liberal perspective, and see the positive, or let me say the views for and against globalization. And so it should be noted that industrialized countries are the ones dominating the world business, because we are mentioning about business because later on, towards the end, before the exams, we shall also talk about entrepreneurship in Africa, because globalization has implication on entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs in Africa. And so, okay, so what is globalization? What are its implications for the conduct of economic policy, particularly in Africa? And we're also asking ourselves the potential benefits and risks, and also what will the developing countries have to do to benefit from globalization, to take advantage of the market, and to avoid the downside or the negative aspects or the effects of globalization. So is there any good reason to fear about globalization? So those are some of the things that we shall be concerned about when it comes to globalization. So to answer these questions, it will be, first of all, very useful for us to look at what globalization is and what it is not, and what has caused it, and what effects does it have. And so we shall situate our discussion in the context that will make it easier to identify the benefits and the risks of African countries being integrated in the global capitalist economy. And so there are various definitions that we shall go through, but of course, they're basically the same. But in simple terms, globalization is the integration of economies throughout the world through trade, financial flows, and exchange of technology and information, and the movement of people. You know, central to globalization is the issue of technological revolution. Later on, we shall discuss about the difference between globalization and the internationalization. Globalization has to include the technological revolution, technology, which is the use of internet, the change in technologies that has really accelerated the process of interconnectivity among the countries. So globalization has become a major topic of discussion and concern in economic cycles since 1990s. Of course, we shall also see later that there's a challenge in terms of knowing when did globalization really happen. Some people look at it as a process that was there even in the 16th century, when the world was beginning to interact, movements of people from one continent to another and so on. But again, others have said no, that was probably internationalization, like there was movements of people, movement of goods and so on, but the world was not intertwined as it is now. So it has been considered as the concept of 1990s. So it's a complex phenomenon which encompasses a great variety of tendencies and trends in economic, social, and cultural spheres. It touches all these spheres of life, because this interconnectivity has touched every aspect of life. So that's why we're saying it has a multi-dimensional character, and so does not lend itself to a unique or particular definition. V.C. George had looked at globalization as increasing interconnectedness of the world through the compression of time and space, brought about by advances in knowledge and technology, as well as by political events and decisions. The issue of compression of time and space is very key when it comes to globalization, because whenever communication is done elsewhere, it is reaching the next area, the different area at the same time. The compression of time and space was not a concept of the 16th century or 17th century or even 18th or 19th century, but it's a concept of 20th century, okay? That's why we're saying that globalization is a concept of 20th century, compression of time and space. People can reach destination within a very short time compared to the past. If email, when you click the computer, the email is sent immediately. So there's compression of time and space. So globalization also refers to the growing of the economic interdependence of countries worldwide through the increasing volume and variety of cross-border transaction in both goods and services. So that growing economic interdependence is a common thing now. Countries are more or less, they don't exist in isolation. There is transfer of capital, transfer of ideas, transfer of goods and services in a rapid manner, okay? Because of the diffusion of a widespread advancement in technology. So advancement in technology is very key in defining globalization. It's a continuous process leading to the free movement and transfer of goods again and services and factors of production. This is a definition according to Wolff. And even information and technology across borders. But it has to, all this transfer of goods and services, ideas, and information are supposed to be aided by technological revolution. Okay, so again, it has been viewed as a process of advancement and increase in interaction among countries and the people of the world, facilitated by technological change in transport, in communication, in political and military power, in knowledge and skills, as well as in interfacing of cultural values and systems. So Paul Nsebambe also had looked at globalization as an international socio-political, economic, and cultural permeation process facilitated by policies of government, private cooperation, international agents, and civil society. Now, central to all these definitions is the interconnectivity and the technological change, and also looking at all these spheres, economic, political, social. So all aspects of human life are being touched touched by globalization because of the technological changes that were there. Interconnectivity, interdependency are also very key to defining globalization. We cannot continue to define it more and more, but it means the same thing, okay? Yeah, so it should also be noted that the individual political, ideological, geographical location, social status, cultural background, and all the things provide the background that determines how globalization is and how it is also interpreted. Some people have looked at globalization like the globalization as colonization. I mean, the current situation of neo-colonialism, where we find that the world is still intertwined in a way that some countries are being exploited, because globalization does not offer, in my view, a kind of a fair outcome, because countries in the South, the third world countries, are not really benefiting from when you compare. They're not benefiting so much from globalization because they are not key people in the play, are not the key players, okay? And so increased global interaction in a number of economic areas began actually to intensify in the late, as I said, 1980s and early 1990s, when many governments supported economic liberalization with the state efforts to uphold free trade. We know very well about the structure adjustment programs and the neoliberal reforms that were there in the 80s and in the 90s. And so those, we are going to, that's when we are seeing really the world becoming intertwined and interdependent. And we are actually seeing in the 90s, the fall of USSR as the father of socialism, and the socialist bloc, disintegrating and so on. So that we are seeing the triumph of global capitalism at that time. So countries began to be intertwined at that time. So looking at the aspects of globalization when it comes to periodization, we can consider globalization as a concept of 1990s, that is in the 20th century, and no longer in the 16th century as it is claimed by other authors, but still they have a reason as to why they say it started that time. But what I can say is that the foundations of globalization were laid before. But when you talk about globalization in its full-fledged form, it comes with the technological revolutions of the 1990s, 1980s. So in the light of that, we need to distinguish between internationalization and globalization. Internationalization is just one of the aspects that satisfies globalization. So when we say it's a necessary but not sufficient condition, like when you can't equate as that they are the same, because globalization has to do with the technological changes and revolutions. Over the past century, for example, Africa has been integrated in the world system through colonization in the 18-something, maybe towards the 20th century. This can be looked as internationalization per se, the process which describes transactions among states reflected in the flows of trade and capital. Yeah? But of course, the countries were more or less separate entities. But with globalization, it's different. What makes difference is that globalization goes beyond internationalization to include technological revolution, liberalization of economies, and also we are seeing even the sovereignty of these states is being interfered with because, you know, the world is becoming more of a global village. So we need to differentiate between internationalization and globalization because of the aspect of technology, but as also the aspect of timing. We are seeing, this is a picture that, you know, it shows the interconnectedness of the world today because they are fast means of transport compared to the previous times, compared to the 16th and the 17th century and the 18th century and 19th century. Things have changed. And that's why we're talking about the difference between the two. So let's look at the characteristics of contemporary globalization process. So from the previous diagram that we are seeing there, it has been seen that people around the globe are more connected to each other than before. Information, money flows is very quick. You can send money through MoneyGram. You can send it through, you know, Western Union. Money reaches the other person, the other end of the world immediately, within a second. But of course, in the past, some of us who are old enough, we used Telegram and some other ways of sending money. But of course, the money would take short time, but not like it is today. So goods and services produced in one part of the world are increasing available in other parts. Just last week, I was buying things from Jumia, you know, this internet-based purchases. And, you know, you get your goods within a short time. International travel is more frequent than before, and therefore globalization is characterized by new and growing social networks that overcome the previous traditional economic, political, cultural, and geographical boundaries. There's no way you can restrict people's movements today. Even if you, like, I remember last month, yes, 2 months ago, 2 months ago, Tanzania had shut down the internet so that whatever was going on there was not going to be revealed out there during the election time, you know, the killing of suppressing of the opposition and so on and so forth. But you know what happened? There are those who are very wise Tanzanians, some of them had to use VPN. So you cannot stop people from, you know, interacting with the other part of the world. They will just find their way because of the nature of the globalization process, you know. Information movement, of course, they could restrict the information, but it still went out. Okay, so globalization is characterized by growing social networks, expansion of social relations, activities, and interdependence, and also intensification and acceleration of social